Thank you for coming. I'm Edie Miller. I'm a member of the Central Vermont OLLI Programming Committee. And by the way, just saying that. Okay. I'm Edie Miller. I'm a member of the OLLI Programming Committee, which reminds me we are just about in 2 weeks to start planning our fall program. If you have any suggestions, please make it known to one of the people around here who are wearing a tag like this. And so let us know that. The second thing I'd like to mention is to please turn off any of your devices. Now's the time. Did I have anything else to announce? No. I think today will be a very, very interesting presentation. I would imagine there are probably not too many people in the room who have not read VTDigger. And today we have the current CEO of VTDigger, Skye Barsh. Skye began her career as a reporter right here in Central Vermont as a reporter for the Times-RS. She reported also for the Free Press and held various positions with the famed Vermont Life, which many of us remember fondly, The Nation magazine, and Chalk Beat. Following a different interest, she is the founder and former owner of Alpenglow Fitness, an exercise studio in downtown Montpelier. As I said, she's the current CEO of VTDigger, a news service that we're all familiar with. I hope she'll give us not only the history of this leader in Vermont digital news arena, but also provide some insight into how her organization navigates the current environment of political polarization, misinformation, disinformation, and technology, which has many of us wishing fondly for the reappearance of Walter Cronkite. Please welcome Skye Barsh.
Hi, everyone. Great. Get situated here. Well, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. Turning out on a snowy day when the sidewalks are still a little treacherous. Before I begin, I did want to take a moment to honor Mary Just Skinner. Mary recruited me for this event. She was also a select board member in my town of Middlesex. We were texting just 3 days before she passed about this event, so I did just want to say thank you to her. She's somebody who cared deeply about Vermont and civic life and about thoughtful public conversation. She's somebody who believed in showing up and staying informed, and she believed that institutions like VTDigger matter. So it feels extra meaningful to stand here because of her invitation, and I want to begin by saying thank you to her and to all of you for sustaining the kind of civic culture that makes organizations like VTDigger possible. As Edie said, I have a history of working in journalism in Central Vermont. I started my career as a local reporter at the Times-Argus. I covered school boards, courts, state government, outdoor recreation, and community stories across the state. And as she said, I later went on to work at Vermont Life and The Nation. And then when I came back from New York, I founded Alpenglow Fitness. I was running that business while doing some freelance publishing work. And while it is a different industry than journalism, there are some overlaps. One of them being what it takes to build a brand from the ground up and sustain it day after day through a global pandemic and a 100-year flood, no less. So when I stepped into leadership at VTDigger, I came to it both as a journalist and as someone who understands what institutional resiliency requires. And that perspective has shaped how I have approached the role, not just telling stories, but really building the organization and the operations so they could last. So the moment we are in, polarization is rising, misinformation spreads quickly, and local newspapers across the country have closed or been hollowed out. A UVM study that came out a couple of years ago found that about 75% of Vermont's newspaper jobs had disappeared in the previous 25 years. And that has consequences. When local news declines, civic participation drops, government transparency suffers, and communities become more fragmented. Something that really calls me to this work is just seeing how differently how much our norms have changed around how we communicate with each other, because social media has really prioritized inflammatory comments and divisiveness, and I really feel called to be part of something that does something different. So Vermont has felt the pressures of the newspaper industry decline, but we've also built something durable, a nonprofit digital-first newsroom that has grown stronger while many others have shrunk. So I'd love to see a show of hands how many of you are regular VTDigger readers. Thank you. How many of you have been reading for more than 5 years? Wow. 10? It's incredible, thank you. And how many of you subscribe to our Daily Digger newsletter? You guys are awesome, thank you. This really matters. VTDigger exists because Vermonters choose to read it and rely on it. Vermont is the envy of many other states. When I go to national conferences, people seek me out. I feel like a rock star coming from Vermont because we have done what so many other states wish they could do, and we serve as inspiration. I really regularly have founders come up to me and tell me that they started a local news organization in their community because of what Ann Galloway did. So not only has Digger strengthened Vermont's civic infrastructure, it has helped strengthen local journalism across America. So long before VTDigger became what it is today, Ann and I worked together at the Times-Argus in the early 2000s. That newsroom shaped us. Our newsroom covered school boards, town meetings, city hall hearings that ran late into the night, from the opening day of deer season, to layoffs at major employers, to fires, to parades. We covered the fabric of central Vermont. We learned how to read budgets, how to file public records requests. We learned that the small details matter, and it matters to get them right. It was rigorous and deeply local. I have this fond memory of going to cover a story of a small school, a private school opening in central Vermont, and Ann was my editor that day, and I was ready to run out the door, and I went up to her desk and asked her if there was anything she wanted me to ask. And did she have a list of questions? And she kept coming up with a question, and I kept trying to go to leave, and she had another question, and Ann was just such a tenacious, dogged journalist, and she taught me so much. However, neither of us could have predicted how dramatically the media landscape would change in the next decade. But the values we absorbed there, accountability, persistence, precision, became foundational. I realize it says 2009 in the title, and the photo's from 2011, but that was the oldest photo I could find in our archives. So in 2009, Ann launched VTDigger. She was one reporter showing up at the State House and not asking for permission to be there. At the time, digital-only nonprofit newsrooms were a radical idea. Many were skeptical and did not take digital-only as seriously as a printed newspaper. But there was a gap forming. Investigative stories and reporting was becoming harder to sustain in traditional newsrooms, and so was State House coverage. VTDigger stepped into that space with a mission to hold power accountable and serve the public. Ann was smart to harness new technology, digital publishing, and she followed the public radio funding model. So building Digger took innovation, and today it's one of our core stated values. It really is in our DNA. And trust built story by story. Then Ann and VTDigger broke the EB5 story, as many of you know, one of the largest frauds, if not the largest, in the state's history. Readership increased, and Ann gained national attention and increased support. Our growth is thanks to our readers. We went from one reporter to a small team, from a handful of beats to statewide coverage, and from a scrappy startup to a professional newsroom. As the news needs kept getting larger, VTDigger kept growing to fill the void. As a nonprofit, all of the funding we raise goes directly back into our operations. As more people donated, and with the investment from institutional philanthropy, Digger would grow, not just in the size of our team, but professionalizing the website, strengthening our editorial systems, investing in data and multimedia capabilities, and building the operational backbone that allows serious journalism to endure. Editorial independence has always been non-negotiable. Impact was prioritized over clicks, but the size of the audience does matter. During the pandemic, VTDigger provided unparalleled updates about COVID levels, policy changes, and the impact on the economy. Like EB5, this was another milestone in Digger's growth. In 2020, we had 32 million web pages in that year alone. Another milestone in VTDigger's history was our coverage of the floods in 2023. So I was 3 months on the job, just barely feeling like I had my legs under me, and we all know what happened next. This moment, I am so proud of our coverage from this time. We had a breaking news alert that Sunday that alerted folks that there was catastrophic flooding on the way. I don't have proof, but I really believe that we likely saved lives. We certainly saved property, since people had some warning about what was to come. And we really provided the most comprehensive and unparalleled coverage connecting the state. You know, we heard from some readers in the Burlington area where there wasn't flooding happening that they had no idea. And when they went on to Digger and saw what was happening in other parts of the state, that was really how they found out about it. Our coverage has won awards. It was used by our congressional delegation to get funding and a designation for support. It really was another moment like EB5 and like the pandemic where Digger had a big milestone. Today, our audience is the envy of the nonprofit news ecosystem. We average about 500,000 unique readers every month in a state of fewer than 650,000 people. We are consistently ranked among the most read nonprofit news sites in the country, and that's compared to national news organizations like ProPublica, and that is not on a per capita basis. So we're really proud of that. So what is Digger today? We have a $3.3 million annual budget this year. We have about 30 staff members. We have 45,000 newsletter subscribers, 9,000 donors. We allow more than a dozen community news organizations to republish our work for free, and we republish some of theirs. So there's a lot of benefit to that. It helps us get our news into areas where community members still rely on print. Maybe broadband isn't as good. It also helps issues that are happening in at the very local level surface to our statewide audience, so they get more attention from Montpelier. And like I said, we have 500,000 unique readers each month. These are just some photos from the field. That's Carly Berlin on the left. She's a reporter that works with both us and Vermont Public through Report for America. That was right after the flood. I have a funny story. So Carly started that week, the week after. It was right around when the flood hit. We hadn't even gotten her company cell phone yet. So I remember sending a message to her, and I said, I'm sorry, our onboarding is usually a little smoother than this. It's just chaos right now. And she said, oh, flood. She said, I'm here from New Orleans. I just moved up from New Orleans. I got this. So. And she's just been, I'm sure you're all familiar with her reporting. She's extremely talented. Sean Robinson reporting in the State House. Adi Guha on the lower left. Peter Dioria in the forefront of the center photo, who got scooped up by Newsday as an investigative reporter earlier this year. Another photo of Sean. And then the photo on the right In 2024, we had an event at the Manchester Public Library with author and historian Jill Lepore. That was really terrific. We're no longer a startup experiment. We publish roughly 1,500 original stories a year, plus our partner stories, plus opinion pieces and obituaries. We are a very important place for opinion. I think we're the only statewide forum. We receive far more letters to the editor than we can print because we do fact check every opinion piece that comes in before it publishes, and that requires a lot of time and a lot of back and forth. But we want you to know that if you read something on Digger, even if it's opinion, that it's rooted in fact. We cover state government, education, housing, environment, healthcare, public safety, business, wealth and poverty and the economy. We conduct investigations, and our newsroom spans the state from southern Vermont, where we have 2 reporters, all the way to the Northeast Kingdom. So we're not just in Montpelier, even though a lot of our coverage is coming out of the State House. We're proud that the majority of our budget is funded by individual donations. Last year, individuals gave over $2 million to VTDigger. That's also really important to me because the more legs of the stool for funding that you have to stand on or sit on, the more you're protecting your independence. We're not relying on any one revenue stream. Very importantly to me, we have no hedge fund ownership, as much as I would really value having that revenue to do more reporting. We don't have a corporate owner, we don't have shareholders, we don't even receive federal funding. So we really feel strongly about our editorial independence, and we feel really grateful that our readers help us do what we do. So, as I said, this scale is not common in nonprofit journalism, and it does matter because journalism can only hold power to account if people are actually reading it. The story on the left is Greta Solsa, one of our reporters covering J.D. Vance's visit to Sugarbush. That story was our most read story of all time for a period of time. These are photos from lunch and learns we've had recently, our former governors. They were really fascinating conversations. So today, VTDigger is widely regarded as Vermont's news organization of record. That's a bold phrase, and I intentionally chose that for as part of the title of this talk today, because there's some question of what does that actually mean. There isn't a governing body that declares one newsroom the organization of record in Vermont, and in journalism we try to be careful about making claims. But to me, it means something practical. When something significant happens in Vermont, people expect Digger to document it thoroughly and accurately. And if we don't, we hear about it. Policymakers read us every morning. Our reporting intersects with Vermont's legal system. Other media outlets follow our reporting. And I really do believe that researchers will one day look back at our archives to understand this period in Vermont's history. I'll walk through a few examples. So our reporting, sorry, I lost my place. Our reporting that helped inform and influence policy came in the legislature's handling of a major elections bill in 2025. A package of election changes that have now become law, that have expanded campaign finance disclosure requirements, clarified rules for write-in candidates and candidates who lose a primary, and other updates to Vermont election procedures. That bill nearly died in the legislature before a last-minute push brought it back for a vote. And legislative leaders have acknowledged that it was Digger's reporting on the political dynamics around the bill that helped keep it alive. I'm struggling here. Let me just grab a sip of water. The story in the middle, Ethan Weinstein reported on a gentleman named Matthew Morgan, who was returned to prison for a mistaken accusation of shoplifting a speaker from Walmart, which triggered a furlough violation. Even after a doctor validated that he was at a medical appointment at the time of that shoplifting and the charge was dropped, he remained in prison. 2 days after Digger reported on his situation, correction officials said he was eligible for furlough release, but he wasn't released from prison for 83 days. We pressed on to, before I jump to that, and then on the third photo, this was one of our flood coverage stories. I don't think Kay Sherpa is here anymore, but many of you probably remember it from downtown Montpelier. These folks the owners had just bought their first home in Barrie, and they had their restaurant in Montpelier. Both buildings sustained flooding in the 2023 floods. But due to the owner's immigration status, they weren't eligible for the kind of funding that most businesses were eligible to clean up and rebuild. We wrote a story about this and talked about their GoFundMe campaign, and as a result, the next day, the GoFundMe campaign increased something like $10,000. We're really proud of that. We pressed on 2 meaningful public records cases last year. The arrest of a state's attorney for driving to a crime scene allegedly under the influence of alcohol, and very sadly, the death of a 19-year-old police officer in Rutland. In that case, we filed a request for access to the dash cam footage, ultimately being able to view it. We wanted to see, was there anything that could be learned or anything that was preventable from this very sad situation. Months later, we reported on a buried internal report that found that officers violated their own pursuit policies, and the officer's death was, quote, preventable, according to that report. And ultimately, the chief of police had stepped down. So when it comes to news organization of record, there actually is a formal piece to this. In late 2025, VTDigger was designated a paper of record by the Vermont Secretary of State's office, which in here really means we're authorized to carry state legal notices. It may sound not, as impactful as all of the other work that we're doing, but it really was a marker of feeling that Digger is seen as the organization that it is. The process to get this designation actually started as early as 2016. I had a former Digger employee text me when she saw our legal notices online to say that she had testified in 2016 and she was so pleased to see finally we were recognized in this way, and she promised to read every single legal notice we ever published. So we do have an official designation. But really the deeper truth is the work of being an organization of record started long before that paperwork did. So trust in a polarized era. We operate in a time when trust in media is fragile, understandably so. There's a wide spectrum of what is considered media, including stockholder-driven and partisan entities, and there are many groups who have historically been marginalized by media. We're trying to do better. So how do we protect our credibility? We show our work, we correct our errors publicly, we source carefully, and we embed reporters in communities rather than parachuting in. We really try to focus on explaining systems and outcomes, not amplifying outrage. And not everybody agrees with every story, and that's okay, but we do really try to listen when people reach out, and we always correct our mistakes. I think of journalism as civic infrastructure, like schools and libraries. You don't always notice it until it's gone. When local journalism is strong, citizens can participate fully in public life. They can make informed decisions, and they can hold leaders accountable. VTDigger has become part of Vermont's civic infrastructure, and it remains strong because readers continue to support it. These photos, so this summer we had a community listening program. So earlier last year, we did a survey of our newsletter readers, And we heard predominantly from folks in Chittenden County and older folks. So we got a grant to really try to get out to more rural communities and try to reach younger readers, the next generation of VTDigger readers. So we partnered with a few pubs for trivia night. This photo on the left is from Babe's Bar in Bethel. We had an event in St. Johnsbury. And we worked with community ambassadors to reach a much wider network of people, trying to reach people who didn't already read Digger, so we could introduce ourselves to them. The picture on the right is from an event we did in Rutland at the Hub, and that was when our reporter Greta Solsa was new. She's actually a Rutland native who had moved to Brooklyn, and we hired her and got her back to Rutland. So that was an event to meet and greet with her. And that's our team in 2024 at Mount Philo. We had a full staff retreat, which was really great. But as for me, as many of you know, and maybe if you've read today's 7 Days, I stepped down as CEO, so I announced that last month, and I'm going to be with VTDigger until June. I really want a thoughtful and strong transition to the next CEO, so they're set up for as much success as possible. This organization means so much to me. And I want to say that plainly because transitions can sometimes create uncertainty. But to me, I view this as a sign of institutional maturity. One of the responsibilities of leadership is making sure an organization does not depend on any one person. VTDigger today has a strong editorial bench. We have operational systems built for the long term. We have a very committed board guiding this transition thoughtfully. And that's exactly what we hope to build. When I stepped into this role after Anne, my goal was not to reinvent Digger, it was to strengthen it and ensure that it could grow beyond its founder while honoring her vision. I'm proud of that work. As what's next for me, I honestly have not had much time to think about that yet. I really focused on this transition, but I will start to give that some thought soon. But what gives me confidence is the institution is strong, and the next CEO can take VTDigger to the moon. So when I think back to the Times-Argus newsroom in the early 2000s, I remember assuming local journalism would always be there, or it's probably more accurate to say I never thought about it not being there. And then I watched in real time as our industry did not adapt quickly enough to the impacts of the internet. Newsrooms became shells of their former selves, and I watched colleague after colleague lose their job. Local journalism survives when communities decide it matters. And I believe we're seeing that right now. I believe the way that I hear people talk about local news is very different than when I first got involved in this career. Vermont has decided local journalism matters. Anne's leap in 2009 was an act of intention, and the growth of VTDigger has been an act of intention. The fact that so many of you read us regularly and have for so long, that's also an act of intention. So I'll say it again, local journalism survives when communities decide that it matters. Mary Jess Skinner believed in engaged citizenship and showing up. Anne Galloway believed the same. Our readers and donors also believed in engaged citizenship and showing up, and so do I. VTDigger's story is, in many ways, a story about Vermonters choosing to show up. We are a lighthouse, inspiring other people in other states to do the same. And for that, I am deeply grateful. Thank you.
What would you do now that you're not doing? Vermont Digger. What is Vermont Digger not doing that you would like to see?
Oh, well, quite a few things if we had more funding. As I mentioned, the opinion section, we have half of a FTE. We have 20 hours a week devoted to opinion. And it's such an important part of not only for our readers to be able to respond to articles that we write, But to have, I really see VTDigger as the convener across differences, not just political ideology, but if, let's say you're an advocate working on a certain issue over here, and you come to Digger to read a story about that issue, but then you see this story about this other issue. We really want to be a convener, and the opinion section is important for that. So I'd also love to have just more multimedia capabilities. Last year was the first time ever that more Americans said they were getting their news from social media than television. So we know that, I'm not personally on TikTok or a TikTok person, but I know that's where people are, and that's where they're getting especially their misinformation and disinformation on social media. It's so easy to share those little video clips that are, inaccurate, and if we want to combat misinformation and disinformation, we have to meet people where they are. But given that on any given day we're already not able to cover all the stories that we want to get to because we just don't have the capacity. We don't have enough people, and that's strictly just because of funding. Just finding the time to think of what is our video strategy and who's going to do it and how are we going to edit the videos. I'd love to have that space and time to think about that.
What do you think will happen to the Times artists and Free Press? And what should happen?
Good question. I don't really know what will happen. Oh, I'm sorry. So the question was, what do I think will happen to the Times Argus and the Free Press, and what do I think should happen? The Times Argus, I believe, is family owned, and I still read it, and there's familiar bylines. I hope that it remains strong. The Free Press is owned by Gannett. They're a big chain, and I wish they were putting more resources into Vermont. I had sort of a wake-up call. Probably a year ago, we had an open position, and I thought, who's at the Free Press that we could poach, maybe? So when I was there were probably, 70 people in the newsroom. It was a very large newsroom. So I went on the About page, on the staff page on the Free Press, and there were 4 pictures, and I went to scroll down the page to see who else there was, and that was the end of the page. And I literally gasped. I did not know it had gotten that small. Yes?
In addition to individual publications, do we still have a presence for the Associated Press and the Vermont Press Bureau?
So the question is, in addition, do we have a Vermont Press Bureau still and the Associated Press? The Vermont Press Bureau was an actual bureau. It was next to the old Miller Sports in Montpelier. And when I was there, it was 3 reporters who covered the State House for both the Rutland Herald and the Times Argus. As far as I know, that's gone. The Associated Press, there might be a videographer in the state, but nothing like there used to be. There still is an Associated Press. We actually, through a grant program, have access to AP photos, which is really helpful for us, for covering the Olympics. Kevin O'Connor's been writing about Olympians with Vermont or ties to Vermont. And we obviously can't send somebody to Italy as much as I would like to be that person. So we use AP photos.
Well, I was thinking not just in terms of that, but they also, AP, acted as a news aggregator, so that when something happens in Brattleboro, you can look at the AP and find that. Nobody's doing that function as far as I know.
Right, nobody's doing that. There is some talk. We have sort of like a light version of that with our community news sharing project, but right now it's us and the partner papers. We're not sharing the partner papers with other partner papers. There's a new group, the Vermont Journalism Coalition, that's housed up at the University of Vermont Center for Community News. So we've all been in conversation about how could we do a better job There's some new, very promising software called Plucky Wire that we're experimenting with that will make it easier. Just the labor of, right now we're all copying stuff, pasting it in our own, and then fixing it and adjusting it. And so this software is supposed to make that much easier. But you're right, there's that, sometimes our stories, our local stories would go to the national wire or international, and that was a wonderful way to keep the world informed as to what's happening in Vermont and vice versa. Yes.
I understand that Vermont Public has felt pressure to do both sides of the story. How is that for Vermont VTDigger?
So the question is about doing both sides of a story. I think philosophically there's been a shift in, we want to tell the whole story, and sometimes there's multiple sides. There's sort of this metaphor of when you go outside and it's raining, do you find somebody who says it's not raining and somebody who says it is raining? That's kind of the both sides as an argument against that. Like, sometimes we just have to tell it like it is. I think it's really important that we're telling, trying to share as many perspectives on an issue as possible. Something Geeta Anand, our editor-in-chief, has talked about is, sometimes if you're writing about something contentious, one of the sides can't talk, for legal or whatever reasons. Trying to find an expert in that, maybe at UVM, who could at least speak broadly to help the reader understand what might be some of the contextual things at play. We are nonpartisan, and because we're a 501c3, one of the interesting things that people don't know is that we can't actually publish letters to the editor that could be considered electioneering. So we can't publish, once a candidate has declared candidacy, we cannot publish anything from them, and we can't publish letters in favor or against a candidate. We can on issues, but not candidates. And I think that's hard because we need to be able to have those conversations in a public sphere, but it would put our 501c3 at risk. Yes? Oh, sorry.
What effect do you think that Bernie Sanders has had on Vermont politics and national politics?
Wow. The question is, what effect has Bernie Sanders had on local and national politics? I think a book just came out about this. Yeah, I mean, significant is the word that comes to mind. I think he is something that when people think of Vermont from out of state, that's one of the things that comes to mind. I mean, he certainly was very influential in the Mamdani campaign. It's been interesting to watch sort of the view of Bernie Sanders from being this, kind of real outsider to his ideas, which what he has said has not changed in however many years. He's very, very consistent. Just kind of seeing how our norms have shifted, how what he's saying is now not as radical or not as considered fringe. Yeah, I'm not an expert, but I've just I interviewed Bernie when he was a rep at the Montpelier High School. He had come to an event, and it's just been really interesting to watch him on the national stage. We just had a story. We partner with Notice, News of the United States, about he was going to have a meeting with some of the AI and data center folks to talk about concerns over data power usage in the environment and water usage. You got a question?
Yeah, I really appreciate that you're dealing with news versus not news, like what color dress is she wearing, whatever the tie looks like. those kinds of, it's innocuous, there's so much of that in other papers. But how do you decide what to cover?
So the question is, well, first it's an appreciation that we're not covering sort of frivolous things like what color tie people are wearing, and then how do we decide what to cover? That's an excellent question. There's a news meeting every morning and an editor's meeting in the afternoon. We are trying to cover the stories that are of the most importance, statewide stories. So there's a lot of factors that go into thinking about what that is. You know, is it how many people does this affect? Can we get somebody to talk to us about it? What is the timeliness? It really just, there's a lot of human judgment in it. Have we written about like something recently, and does something else deserve the attention? There are so many stories we can't get to, you know, just because of the size of our team. So those are tough calls, but the reporters work really closely with their editors. The editors are talking to each other throughout the day and deciding what is going to be the news of the day, maybe what needs to wait, maybe what needs more work. Okay.
This is pragmatic, but how much of your funding comes from ads, from private donations, from subscriptions? How is the Digger fully funded?
Sure, so the question is, how are we funded? What's the breakdown between membership, donors, advertising? So last year, it's true of most years, at about 2/3 of our funding comes from individual donations. We consider a member anyone who gives $1 a year up to, we have a donor who gives 6 figures. So that is the bulk of our funding. Advertising is about 1/6, a little bit less. And grants, institutional philanthropy, that's another 1/6. So it really is the majority individuals donating. I think we have some growth opportunities for advertising. We have such an engaged audience. We have somebody new on our advertising team, and he's really sharp and is really enjoying his work. So he's already bringing in some new partners to sponsor us, which is great. Yes?
Does the 501c3 rule mean that you won't, can't accept political advertising?
So that's a great question. Does a 501c3 preclude us from accepting political advertising? No, but we pay taxes on that revenue. So we have a disclaimer. We can run a political ad. We have a disclaimer that says we don't endorse the ad. And then at the end of the year, when we're preparing our taxes, those ads we do pay business income tax on. So we go one by one every ad that we've run, and we have, it's called the UBIT, Unrelated Business Income Tax spreadsheet, and mark which ones qualify. The glamorous part of the role.
I wish I could be one of those 6-figure donors, but I'm not.
Me too.
One of the things that I do in the morning is to read the obits and the Times Argus. And then the next thing is to look at Vermont Digger. It's the first thing that I do, so I know what's going on in Vermont a little bit, which otherwise I'm not going to find out. And it's been wonderful watching over these many years the growth of Vermont Digger. It's been really terrific, so thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Really appreciate that. Yes.
I have, as a regular and longtime reader of the Times Argus, I have noticed as that paper has gotten shrunk, that there is less and less national and international news. The front page stories are all local community, local government, and I'm wondering, what that means is that whatever information we're getting on coming from other sources, online, TV or whatever, and I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about that.
Sure, so the question is about how the Times-Argus in particular, as it's gotten smaller, is really prioritizing local news on its front page versus the national and international coverage that it used to carry. I can speak for us, certainly our lane, our niche is Vermont news, and I think the thought there is that you can get national news elsewhere, and I just always recommend a variety in your media diet. Try to seek out a number of sources to read about an issue and see how different news organizations are covering it. The Vermont Community Foundation just partnered with an organization called Impact Architects to do a news ecosystem and landscape study in Vermont. And what they found was that generally people feel that their national news needs are met, if not inundated. I just saw last night the New York Times had 24 journalists at the State of the Union. Like, we don't even have 24 journalists. So I am envious to cover one event. Yeah, we, as part of that AP program that I mentioned earlier, we do have access to run their international and national coverage, but we just thought about it and thought it might be confusing for our readers because I think what they come to us for is Vermont. It's a hard one, we don't live in a bubble, so we don't want to convey that, but that's really our niche.
Early on in your talk, you said that some percentage of papers in the state had folded. Do you have any advice or guidance for them? Digger's doing its own thing, but could other papers adopt any part of what it is you do and be more viable?
So the question is about how many newspapers have declined, and does Digger have any ideas for other news organizations to be viable? It's a hard business. It's an expensive pursuit, and for so long it was a commercial endeavor, and we weren't really having the conversation about it being a public good. So I think there's a couple things. I think education around what happens when local news goes away is really important, and there's an initiative called Press Forward, and they are doing really good work on the national and the local level to have those conversations. But my advice is just to ask, to state your need and ask for it. And again, for a long time, we were always told, like, you're in journalism, you're not the story. Don't talk about yourself. It's weak to show, there's like financial strain, but people want to help, and people value our community papers, and everyone's busy, and if you're not really like putting it out there that you need the support to keep going, how will people know? But we certainly don't have it all figured out either. We still we don't have an endowment. We still raise our budget every year, and sometimes it's a nail biter. So I don't really have the silver bullet. But we're really fortunate in Vermont that so many people are dedicated. There's a lot of volunteers working on local news. I saw Greg Gerdell here. I know he's been involved in The Bridge, which is an excellent paper. Lisa Scalodi in Waterbury, I don't know how she does it. I mean, she is putting out so much news on her own. She's managing their Facebook page, their newsletter. Thank God, she's making sure Waterbury has news, but it's fragile. It's really, right now, there's a lot of folks doing it volunteer or doing it because they have a passion for it and they want to serve the community, but we need to make sure it's sustainable. And Greg?
So after that mention, I do have a question, because we've known each other, you have involvement both with Vermont Life magazine and with Vermont Sports, which seems to have evaporated in recent months. Is that the Kason, what you think about those sorts of publications?
Yeah, so the question is about Vermont Life magazine, which is sadly no longer, and Vermont Sports magazine, which is back. They have new owners, and I think they also own the Adirondack version of Vermont Sports, so Adirondack something or other outdoor. So those were two different business models. Vermont Life was subscription funded advertising, and they had a store. So they produced, you probably remember, the wall calendars and then Vermont Artisan Gifts. A lot of things happened there. Wall calendars were once a booming business. A lot of people have their calendars on their phones now. Vermont Life was owned by the state of Vermont. After I left, I think it was about a year later, the state folded the magazine, which was really crushing. I thought it was such a beautiful representation of our state. I would go to friends and family across the country, and you'd see them on their dining or their coffee tables. And nobody's really doing that kind of journalism about Vermont anymore. And it was beautiful. It was positive. It was not fluff. I mean, it was really, there was rigor in the journalism, but we really told the story of artisans and entrepreneurs and the food scene. And 7 Days is doing some of that very well, but I'll stop because I'm just sad about it. But Vermont Sports was a free magazine, print and advertiser funded. So the ski shops and bike shops all would advertise in that magazine, and that's how it paid for the business. But print's getting harder. The cost of printing is expensive. There are fewer printers who do it. And print advertising is a little bit of a tougher sell sometimes, because with digital advertising, you know exactly how many people clicked on your ad. With print advertising, you just gotta trust that and I think it's very effective, but it's harder to show that in the business model to the clients.